Hello. It's now time for the public key portion of the course.
Chapter 6, on public key cryptography, is comprised of 3 video lectures. V6a introduces the notion of public key cryptography, including public key encryption and digital signatures. V6b reviews some notions from elementary number theory that will be needed in chapters 7 and 8. V6c will review some basic notions from the analysis of algorithms in the context of algorithms for basic arithmetic operations and modular arithmetic operations. We'll also cover the important repeated square and multiply algorithm for modular exponentiation. If you haven't already done so, please do subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, please recommend our courses to your colleagues, friends, and fellow students. Our webpage is cryptography101.ca.
In symmetric-key cryptography, the communicating parties Alice and Bob a priori share some secret keying information. So Alice and Bob somehow agree upon the shared secret key by communicating over a secure channel. They later leverage the shared secret key to engage in secure communications over the unsecured channel, perhaps by using AES HMAC or AES GCM. One problem with symmetric key cryptography is the key establishment problem. Namely, how do Alice and Bob establish the shared secret key K? One method is point-to-point distribution. Alice selects the key and sends it to Bob over a secure channel. In practice, the secured channel might be a trusted courier, a face-to-face meeting, or maybe the process of delivering and installing a SIM card that contains an authentication key into Alice's device. In general, these methods are not practical for large-scale applications. However, they do work in some scenarios, such as the GSM setting. A second method for key establishment is to use the services of a trusted third party, TTP. Here's a skeleton of how this might work in practice. Each user, say Alice, shares a secret key, KAT, with the trusted third party, T, for a symmetric key encryption scheme, E. To establish this key, Alice must physically visit T's facilities once. At a future point in time, T serves as a key distribution center. So, when Alice wishes to communicate with the second party, Bob, she sends T a request for a key to be shared with Bob. T selects a session key K, encrypts it with the key that it shares with Alice, and sends to Alice the resulting ciphertext. Alice decrypts with KAT and obtains the session key K. T also encrypts K for Bob, using the secret key he shares with Bob, and sends Bob the ciphertext. Bob decrypts to recover K. And so Alice and Bob now share the secret key K, which the TTP also knows. There are several drawbacks with this approach. For one, the TTP has to be unconditionally trusted, since it generates all session keys for all pairs of users. Also, it's a very attractive target, because if you were to break into the TTP's computers, then you would learn all the long-term shared secrets, and thus in the future, you would be able to decrypt all the ciphertexts and obtain all the session keys. Thirdly, the TTP is also a critical reliability point. If it ever goes down, then Alice and Bob cannot engage in secure communications. A second drawback with symmetric key cryptography is the key management problem. In a network of n users, each user has to share a different key with every other user, and so each user has to manage n-1 different secret keys. So the total number of keys managed in the system is n choose 2, which is roughly n squared over 2. When n is large, managing this many secret keys might be difficult in practice. A third drawback with symmetric key cryptography is that non-repudiation is impractical. Recall that non-repudiation means that an entity cannot deny having been the source of a message. So when Alice sends Bob a message, not only is Bob assured that the message came from Alice, but Bob can also prove to a third party that Alice did indeed send him the message. Strictly speaking, symmetric key techniques cannot be used to achieve non-repudiation. This is because Alice and Bob share a secret key, so Bob can do with the secret key whatever Alice can do with that secret key. So for instance, if Alice uses a secret key to send Bob a message, perhaps authenticated using HMAC, Bob knows that the message came from Alice, but Bob cannot prove to a judge that the message came from Alice because Bob could have generated the message and its tag himself. These drawbacks with symmetric key cryptography can all be alleviated to some degree. A more viable solution is to use asymmetric cryptography, more commonly known as public key cryptography. Here is a one-sentence characterization of the beautiful idea of public key cryptography. In public key cryptography, the communicating parties a priori share some information that is authenticated but not secret. In other words, the need for a secure channel for distributing secret keys in symmetric key cryptography has been replaced with the need for a channel that's authenticated but not secret to distribute public keys. Public key cryptography was invented by Ralph Merkle and independently by Whitfield Diffie and Martin Hellman in 1975. It's a remarkably simple idea, but extremely important, certainly one of the top 10 ideas in all of computer science. And the idea of public key cryptography is also quite counterintuitive. To convey how counterintuitive the idea of public key encryption is, let me relate Ralph Merkle's story to you. In 1974, Ralph Merkle was an undergrad student at UC Berkeley taking a computer security class. Students in the class had to do a course project. Merkle's project was going to be on public key establishment that he was thinking about. He wrote up a 7-page project proposal, which the course professor did not understand, and Merkle was asked to shorten the proposal. So Merkle came back with a 2-page project proposal.
Let me read 2 excerpts from Merkle's second draft of his project proposal. Secure communications are made possible because of knowledge known to both people, which is not known to anyone else. Usually both people know this knowledge because they were able to hold a private conversation with each other before they began to send encrypted messages over an unsecured channel. It might seem intuitively obvious that if 2 people have never had opportunity to prearrange an encryption method, then they will be unable to communicate securely over an insecure channel. While this might seem intuitively obvious, I believe it is false. I believe that it is possible for 2 people to communicate securely without having made any prior arrangements that are not completely public.
The professor still didn't understand Merkle's ideas, and so he asked Merkle to rewrite the proposal once again. This frustrated Merkle, and he dropped the course. So Merkle worked on the idea of public key cryptography on his own. Merkle later submitted a paper for publication in the Journal of the Communications of the ACM. This is a well-respected computer science journal. However, the paper was rejected. The referees did not understand the idea of public key cryptography. Merkle was informed that his paper is not in the mainstream of present cryptography thinking, and experience shows that it is extremely dangerous to transmit key information in the clear. Of course, the keys that were transmitted in the clear in Merkle's scheme were not secret keys, but public keys that were authenticated but not secret. To the referees, this just didn't make any sense. Merkle described his idea for key establishment using so-called Merkle puzzles. This method is meant to be proof of concept and is not intended to be practical. The goal of Merkle's protocol is for Alice and Bob to establish a shared session key by communicating over an authenticated but non-secret channel. Alice begins by creating n puzzles P1, P2 up to Pn. Think of n as being large, perhaps 1 billion. These puzzles are easy for Alice to create, but each puzzle takes T hours to solve. Think of T as being 5 hours, say. When someone solves the ith puzzle, they obtain a 128-bit session key SKI that Alice had chosen, and a randomly selected 128-bit serial number NI, again which Alice had chosen. Alice chooses and stores the session keys and serial numbers when she creates the puzzles. Alice then sends these n puzzles to Bob over the non-secret but authenticated channel. When Bob receives the puzzles, he selects an index j at random between 1 and n, and solves the jth puzzle pj. After T hours, Bob obtains the session key skj and the serial number nj. So Bob will now use skj as a secret key he shares with Alice. But Bob needs to tell Alice which puzzle he solved. Namely, he needs to tell Alice the index j by communicating over the non-secret channel. Here's how Bob does this. Bob sends to Alice the serial number nj over the non-secret channel. Alice looks up the serial number nj in her stored table and thereby notes the corresponding session key skj. An eavesdropper who sees the billion puzzles that Alice sends to Bob and the serial number nj has no choice but to solve the puzzles one at a time until she solves the jth puzzle pj and encounters the serial number nj. She then knows that the session key is skj. On average, the eavesdropper will have to solve 500 million puzzles before she solves the puzzle pj. On average, this would take the eavesdropper 500 million times t hours to solve. This is a lot more work than the t hours that Bob took to solve the jth puzzle. Here's how the puzzles might be created. To create a puzzle PI, Alice encrypts with AES in CVC mode a 3-block message, where the blocks are the session key and the serial number repeated twice. The encryption key KI used to create the puzzle is RI concatenated with 88 zeros, where RI is a randomly selected 40-bit string. Anyone can solve PI by doing exhaustive key search on RI. So for each 40-bit key RI, one would decrypt PI and check if the second plaintext block equals the third plaintext block. If it does, then you most likely have the correct secret key, and therefore also the session key. So PI can be solved in 2 to the 40 steps by exhaustive key search. This is feasible, but still a considerable amount of work. Let's take a look at some of the details of public key cryptography, but still at a very high level. I'll present the frameworks in this lecture, and we'll give concrete examples in chapters 7 and 8. In public key cryptography, there is a key pair generation stage. Each entity, Alice, generates a key pair, PA-SA, where SA is Alice's secret key and PA is her public key. A basic security requirement is that it should be infeasible for an adversary to deduce the secret key from the corresponding public key. As an example, Alice's secret key might be a pair of randomly selected large prime numbers p and q, whereas her public key is their product p times q. Computing the secret key from a public key is the integer factorization problem. This problem is believed to be intractable for sufficiently large primes P and Q. Suppose now that Alice wishes to send Bob a secret message M using public key encryption. Alice first obtains an authentic copy of Bob's public key PB. This is done somehow by communicating over an authenticated but non-secret channel. Alice then applies the encryption function, which takes as input Bob's public key and the plaintext M to get the ciphertext C. And then she sends C to Bob over the unsecure channel. To decrypt C, Bob applies a decryption function which takes as input his secret key and the ciphertext C and produces the plaintext M.
A public key encryption scheme must satisfy the following correctness condition. For all key pairs PB and SB, and for all plaintext messages M, if C is the encryption of M using the public key PB, then the decryption of C using SB yields the plaintext M.
An eavesdropper who sees the ciphertext C presumably cannot decrypt C to get M, because the eavesdropper does not know the secret key S sub B. Note that it's very important that Alice be assured that she actually has Bob's public key PB. If Alice had Chris's public key and mistakenly thinks that it's Bob's public key, then Alice would encrypt the message using Chris's public key. And so Chris, and not Bob, would be able to decrypt the corresponding ciphertext. Hence, Alice's confidentiality would be broken.
I'll repeat the main feature of public key encryption. Alice, or indeed any party, encrypts a message for Bob using Bob's public key, whereas Bob is the only party who can decrypt the ciphertext using his private key. Public key encryption does not provide authentication services, since any party could have encrypted the message for Bob.
Public key cryptography can also be used to create digital signatures, thereby providing authentication services. To sign the message M, Alice applies a signing function which takes as input her secret key and the message M and produces the signature S. She then sends the message and signature to Bob over the unsecure channel. To verify Alice's signature on the message, Bob does the following. Bob first obtains an authentic copy of Alice's public key PA. This is done by somehow communicating over the authenticated but non-secret channel. Bob then applies a verification function which takes as input Alice's public key, the message, and her signature, and outputs accept or reject.
A signature scheme must satisfy the following correctness condition. For all key pairs PA and SA, and for all messages M, if S is the signature on M using the private key SA, then the signature verification algorithm, with inputs the public key PA, the message M, and the signature S, will accept.
An adversary who wishes to compute Alice's signature S on the message M presumably cannot do this because the adversary does not know Alice's secret key S sub A. Note that signatures are message dependent, so each time Alice signs a message, she can get a different signature S. You should also appreciate the importance of Bob having an authentic copy of Alice's public key. If Chris signs a message using Chris's secret key, and Bob then verifies the signature using Chris's public key, but Bob mistakenly thinks that he's using Alice's public key, then Bob will conclude that Alice signed the message, when in fact Chris signed the message. So authenticity of the public keys is very important. Notice that anyone who has an authentic copy of Alice's public key can verify the authenticity of the message signed by Alice. This authentication property cannot be achieved with the symmetric-key MAC scheme and is crucial for the secure delivery of software upgrades. In this application, a software company signs a software upgrade once, and millions of computers around the world can verify the authenticity of the upgrade using the software company's public key. We can now see how public key cryptography overcomes the drawbacks with symmetric key cryptography. There is no requirement for a secure channel. However, there is a requirement for an authenticated channel. Each user has only one key pair, which simplifies key management. A signed message can be verified by anyone who possesses the corresponding public key. And signature schemes facilitate the provision of non-repudiation services. This is because if Alice denies having signed a message, Bob can take the signed message and Alice's public key to a judge, and the judge can verify that Alice did indeed sign that message. Public key cryptography does have a major drawback. Namely, the schemes are much slower than their symmetric key counterparts. Hence, in practice, what is generally used are hybrid schemes. Here is one example of a hybrid scheme. Suppose that Alice wishes to encrypt and sign a secret message M for Bob. Alice first signs the message M using her secret key for a digital signature scheme. The signature is S. Alice then selects a secret key K for a symmetric key encryption scheme such as AES, and she obtains an authentic copy of Bob's public key PB. She uses the public key encryption scheme to encrypt the session key K with Bob's public key to get the ciphertext C1. And she encrypts the message M and its signature S using AES with the session key. The ciphertext is C2. Alice sends C1 and C2 to Bob. To recover M and verify its authenticity, Bob does the following. He first uses his secret key SB to decrypt C1 to get the session key K. This is decryption for the public key encryption scheme. Bob then decrypts C2 using AES and the session key K to obtain the message and its signature. He obtains an authentic copy of Alice's public key PA and verifies the signed message using Alice's public key. In this hybrid scheme, Alice and Bob are benefiting from the functionality of public key cryptography to sign and verify messages. They also benefit from the speed of symmetric key cryptography when the message M is encrypted using AES. And they benefit from the functionality of public key encryption by being able to encrypt and decrypt the session key K without having any previous shared secrets. The plaintext M might be very long, but encryption is fast because AES is a fast encryption scheme. On the other hand, public key encryption might be slow, but what's being encrypted is a session key, which is very small, for example, 128 bits in length. And so, even though public key encryption is a slow operation, it's being applied to a very short plaintext message K. And in this way, Alice and Bob get the best of both worlds.
In video lecture V6b, we'll review some basic notions from elementary number theory that we'll need in chapters 7 and 8. We'll review the integers, greatest common divisors, and the Euclidean algorithm. The integers modulo n, finding inverses modulo n, and Fermat's little theorem. Have a great day!